It's that time of week again. It's our crystal confab. And last week we talked about green adventuring and putting it in plants. And look behind me, it's got greener as well. The boys were just commenting on that. Today we're going to talk about something else that I find really beneficial for kind of building structure and getting things in shape. And that is the crystal of fluorite. Now it's really interesting because we take turns doing these introductions, and I always seem to end up with an introduction on a crystal I don't use that much. And we'll discuss that a little bit as well in fluorite, but I wanted to jump over to Nicholas straight away and tell me, Nicholas, what's so fascinating for you about fluorite and especially its structure?
So, I think fluorite is so recognizable once we see its crystal structures, when we see that it comes to us as part of the isometric crystal system, meaning equal measure. That means we frequently get cubes like these kind of icy green ones that I've got with beautiful phantoms in there. But it also means that it will form some natural octahedra, like these perfect pink octahedral fluorites from Inner Mongolia. Um, if we were to take a look at its chemical formula, it's really simple. It's calcium fluoride. And as a result, what we can anticipate is that we've got a pretty equal distribution of that one calcium ion and those two fluoride ions to balance it out. It's a distant relative of table salt. They're both halide minerals, and they both have that cubic structure. And this structure is something that has been what I come back to with fluorite again and again and again. I remember reading, pretty early in my crystal journey that, some authors associated it with like order emerging from chaos, or with organizing the mind, or other kinds of things. And I find this to be really true, and I suspect I won't be the only one here talking tonight about similar kinds of themes. But coming back to this sense of structure, when we look at not just the physical crystallography of fluorite, but also the ingredients that go into it, it gives us some clues. So let's start with this cubic crystal system. When we start to organize and classify minerals according to the geometry of their makeup, of their lattices, we begin with the hypothetical situation where we have three lattices, or three axes rather, in the lattice that are all the same length and all meet at right angles. And that's what we get in fluorite and pyrite and magnetite and so many other cubic minerals. Whether we can see them as perfect cubes or not, in the case of garnets, for example, they don't tend to form actual cubes, but they've got the same setup of their axes. These are going to be crystals that are extraordinarily stabilizing. Everything allows them to just kind of settle in. Think of them as building blocks. They've got a nice stable base. The center of mass, the center of gravity is perfectly in the middle of them, and allows us to really get this deeply centering and grounding presence from minerals that belong to this crystal system. Fluorite obviously typifies that really well with its kind of cubic structure. Here I've got some root beer brown iridescent fluorite with, if I can find it, where'd it go? A little bit of celestite here in the matrix. And this comes from Clay Center, Ohio. These are actually really strongly fluorescent as well. And they have a quality of persistent phosphorescence. I've got a polished sphere of this same material and just a brief glimmer of a UV lamp, and it will continue to glow for quite a bit, like a lot of those treated stones will. This does it naturally. But fluorite brings this quality of light, of illumination to the inner structure. It wants us to take a look at things at their root and be able to disassemble the parts and reassemble them a little bit more efficiently. The cubic crystal system is going to give us that kind of sense of centering where all the faces, all the angles, all the axes, all the edges are perfectly proportioned to one another, and they all have this equal relationship. They're equidistant from the center point. When we look at its chemical formula as calcium fluoride, we're also going to get a couple little clues there. Minerals that contain fluorine or fluoride ions are going to be extremely mental, volatile, airy in many ways, which I think is counterintuitive for a stone that is heavy and earthy and dense. And we can blame the shift in that to the calcium that it has. I think a lot of crystal books are going to tend to associate fluorites kind of generally with mercury because of their mental qualities. But when we look at that really strong calcium influence, think about where calcium shows up in the highest concentration in our body. It's our skeletal system, it's our teeth and our bones. It's the things that literally give our form structure. And this is a part of us that is ruled by Saturn, who's all about restriction. And what is a container except a restriction? So if we want to build the structure of something, if we want something that holds our interest, our focus, our attention, our effort, in other words, something that wrangles our mind, we have to be able to build, I don't want to say an enclosure, but definitely a lens through which it can be filtered, something that we can kind of fasten around our mind to kind of aim it in the right direction. And fluorite provides that to us. And it is whimsical in the way it shows up in so many different colors and patterns. I've got this nearly black piece of deep purple fluorite with just hints of yellow. This is from Derbyshire in the Peak Districts. This is the famous Blue John fluorite. Of course, speaking of English fluorites, would have to give honorable mention to the stuff that's coming out of County Durham up in the north. So here's some from the Rogerley mine with some quartz on it. And then if we just kind of invert the relationship, instead of fluorite on quartz, if it's fluorite in quartz, these are some of my favorite included quartzes that come from Madagascar, and they have octahedral and cuboctahedral fluorites all throughout. This one's kind of unique because there are some open pockets here where it was touching the surface that later eroded. So some of those, they appear to be white crystals inside. They're actually just open cavities that used to have fluorite in them, but are perfectly shaped like those little octahedral crystals. So I often turn to the stone when I need to reassess or reevaluate the structure of something. If I'm outlining the manuscript of a book, you can sure bet fluorite is nearby. Also, if I just need to create a checklist and adhere to it, gotta have fluorite on the desk. I feel like maybe with the overwhelming amount of work and so many loose ends that I've got at the day job in the museum, what I need to do is just take a field trip down to the humongous single cube of fluorite that we have that I can barely get my arm around, and just hang out with it while I evaluate my to-do list, because then maybe it would help me create the necessary internal structure that allows me to follow through and create the external structure. And that's kind of what the other side of what calcium does. When we see calcium-rich minerals, they help us establish what the link is between our inner landscape and the world of form. They help us take this really nebulous idea of the inner workings of something, the inspiration behind something, and map it out into the world of form, beginning with that kind of skeleton of it. For me, in the case of writing a book, that means starting with an outline, and then we flesh it out, and it becomes this eventually a whole book, or 10, as the case might be by now. But I really appreciate this as a neurodivergent person. This is a stone that helps me really interface with the burgeoning list of things I got to accomplish in every single moment, and ensure that I'm kind of going layer by layer, strata by strata, and effectively getting everything done. Thankfully, I don't have to do it in a linear fashion. I just have to get it all done. Um, and Fluorite enables me to do that with a certain amount of flexibility and grace, thankfully. So it's, you could say, an ally I have always nearby, even though I wouldn't consider it like one of my favorite crystals. It's not something I go out of my way to sit down and have a good meditation with. It's always in arm's reach just because I benefit so much from it.
I remember back in the day when we first started collecting crystals, and I'm sure your two stories are very similar. You know, the tumbled stones was a great arena for kind of getting to know your crystals and different things like that. And I think what does bring fluorite to many people's attention is the good old rainbow fluorite, where it's normally bands of normally the purple and the green, and sometimes you get a little bit of blue or yellow in there as well. So we've talked in the past about different crystals and the colors soaking in as they grow. it's kind of unique, I find, with that rainbow banding with the fluoride in common crystals. Nicholas, what brings that out, or what causes that?
A few different things. What's really interesting is that we are still currently debating what the color centers are caused by in some fluorites. And the problem is that purple fluorite from one place might be caused by interstitial calcium ions. In other words, calcium that isn't part of the crystal lattice, but is just kind of between the crystal lattice. And if it gets exposed to the right kind of ionizing radiation, it will do kind of what the iron and amethyst does. But in other places, the color purple in some fluorites is caused by other things. So it's usually going to be the same culprits generally as any other colored mineral or multicolored mineral. Trace elements, trace ions, trace minerals, and those things get kind of wedged in some part of it, either through ionic substitution, something replaces a component of the crystal lattice, or interstitially by squeezing in between. But there's some pretty interesting analyses that have been done, for example, of the multicolored fluorites that you find in Cave and Rock in Hardin County, Illinois. And even within the same specimen, they generally follow the same sequence of colors. That doesn't mean that every crystal is exactly the same colors, but this particular layer of yellow you see in this one and that particular layer of yellow you see in that one formed at the same time. Um, Not every yellow and not every purple are formed by the same trace stuff, which leads people to disagree about what's actually causing the color. And I find that really fascinating.
Kyle, it's really interesting how there is such a full range. We could probably do a full 6 hour episode marathon talking about yellow fluorite, green fluorite, blue fluorite, purple fluorite, pink fluorite, brown fluorite, and so on. Do you tend to use fluorite just as a general crystal, or do you kind of go off and find yellow fluorite's good for this and green fluorite's good for that, and so on?
Well, I hope you're ready for a little bit of show and tell because I'm here for like the full color spectrum. With fluorite, I started with rainbow, the infamous and famous beautiful rainbow. This wand helped me get my gemology degree on that wall. At the start of my journey, I learned that fluorite and memory and order of the mind very much go hand in hand. So this was one of my early purchases, and it would be in my pencil case every single lesson. It would be with me whenever I studied, and then it was in my pockets whenever I was doing my exams. And I would rub, work my way through, stop myself, and find a little bit of order to remember what I knew. And it allowed me to kind of recall, find the information somewhere in the back of the mind, and has been a beneficial support for nearly 15 years. But it was basically as soon as I finished that degree that I was like, okay, what about the whole range? What about the whole family? Let's start to get to know them. And I have found each of them to be very, very different, and each of them to be useful for really different things. I found myself, I would say yellow golden was probably the first one that I was really drawn to by itself. I was really lucky to get this carved little dragon head. And this is one of my favorite pieces. This is Spanish fluorite on pyrite. And it has this warmth, this brightness, and it creates an order where our sort of gut intuition lies, if that makes sense. And when we need to listen to our gut, it's that like calculated risk, I would say, is a term that really comes to the fore when it comes to that. And so we're thinking, we're having a little bit of order, but we're then listening to our gut to take risks. It allows us to be more confident in what we can do. It helps us to be less scattered. And I find us to be more able to kind of walk the course positively, engaged in what we're doing. When you have like the cave in rock versions, when they're the purple, bleu jaune, another one here where you get the purples and the yellows, I find that twofold intuition coming to the fore. So your intuition of the mind and spirit and your intuition of the gut coming together. And it's this, I can trust myself. I can listen to myself. I have what I need within me and I can create as I go. I find it kind of not able to create something from nothing, but it helps you to find stability where it seems like there isn't any, and you can really find your way forward in a positive way. When it comes to the blues, I find they have this calming effect. This is a really soft teal blue. This is a lovely sort of rich blue. I find they have confidence in what you can say and in what you know. That sort of truth, that communication that comes from blue is sort of focused in a way that allows us to be confident in what we know. We are less doubtful, we are less unsure, and we're able to sort of bring across all of that information that we can kind of get stuck with. If you find yourself maybe a little bit stuck communicating all the information that you have, and you get a little bit like, oh, how do I bring it? Or maybe you get stuck sort of speaking in public where you know what to say, but you can't say it because all the eyes are on you. I find that blue fluorite allows you to go, okay, I feel good. I know what I know, and I'm going to bring it forward in order. I'm not going to feel that pressure so much. So they all kind of work differently and really, really positively, but it's the ones that have different layers of color. So this is a Durham piece that color changes naturally when you take it out into the light. This is an Okaruso Namibia cluster that has purple to blue to green. This is an alien eye Erongo that has purple and blue with goshenite and black tourmaline. I find the ones that have all of the things in different proportions to be really fun and really interesting to work with on a deep meditative level. They help you to really work through lots of information. It helps you to create more order when you're trying to harness all of that information intuitively. It helps you to then be a bit more practical in the way that you bring it in. It helps you to find a little bit of order and a little bit of cohesion with all of that information. It helps to find place to all of it, whether it be seemingly disparate or whether it be, you know, lumped together in like gemology. You can still create a level of cohesion that allows you to process the information, work with it, utilize it to your advantage. It is, as Nicholas mentioned, calming and grounding. And like, I like to think of it like the blinkers. You mentioned that kind of ignoring the distractions. It's like the horse blinkering system. Like, it gives you that focus. It gives you the ability to be less bothered by all of the noise and all of the possible distractions that are out there. I've found recently, I've managed to get a piece of the yttrium fluorite, which is that really soft sort of violet. This for me is just like the chillest of the fluorite family that I've met and worked with. I find it to be just really calming, ready to let you sort of settle into yourself. I'm confident that it has more to reveal, but it's only been in my possession for a couple of weeks. So we're still getting to know each other, but I really, really do enjoy it. The one that I find most sort of almost at odds with its personality is pink fluorite. So this is the alpine pink fluorite, and I find it to have this edge that is different to the rest. It has a compassionate side that is ready to help you to feel your emotions. The rest of them, it's more emotionless, or get them out of the way so we can do what we need to do, or don't let them overwhelm you so you can create your order. Whereas I find these sort of pink ones ready to let you feel, ready to let you express that emotional side a little bit more, ready to give you space to have your emotion. And that's where you find order. That's where you find cohesion, is actually by allowing yourself to be human and to feel the feels and to know that's part of the human experience. And then you can find more clarity after actually feeling and expressing. It's like you can't have one without the other. It helps you to sort of not skip the process. Whereas I find the green fluorite allows you to kind of not be bothered by the emotional stuff. It allows that to sort of not overwhelm you. You don't need to go into feeling it because it's just going to distract you and hold you back. It's so different for all of them. If you can work with as many as possible, obviously it would be amazing. But work with rainbow, I think, to start, and try and dissect it. Try and dissect those colors, those pieces. Allow yourself to be engaged. I think Nicholas mentioned that, like allowing your attention to be focused for long enough to get something done, I think is really, really important. And fluorite, it does engage us. It allows you to feel like you can. And I think that's something that holds so many of us back, is thinking like you can't. And I think fluorite changes can't to can in a really lovely way, in a really positive way, and in a way I think is really palatable for everyone to work with.
Oh, you kind of asserted yourself as being the master of grids amongst the group here. You've got a grid or two in the room that you're in right now. I'm thinking with the isometric structure of fluorite being such a powerful force in its energy, do you find fluorite comes up and being a really good crystal for grids?
Without question, all of these pieces that I've shown you are in different grids. None of them are in grids together. They're all in grids working with different things. And I find they bring a sense of order to whatever they work with. You could place it centrally, you could place little pieces as a part of the grid. I find whenever you add it in, even if there's not so much order, it creates more anyway. It brings them all together. It's like, as Nicholas mentioned, when he mentioned Saturn, I was like, it has that managerial sense. Like, it's the manager of the cafe. It's the one that has the serious hat on, that's going to make sure everyone else is working together so we can get the business done.
Mm. Now, I'm not too sure if anyone else was thinking this, but I was wondering whether Kyle having that fluoride in his pocket during his exams does constitute cheating. But I'm going to add to that as well with some essential oils. So the essential oil that I find works really, really well with fluoride is rosemary. Now, rosemary has been found to help with memory and recall. So the little trick is if you have an exam or you need to study something or you need to commit something to memory to then recall at a later date, what you want to do is you want to have that fluorite with you, and you also want to diffuse rosemary essential oil. Rosemary is going to just help the mental function to work really well. In fact, any oil that comes from a small plant and the leaf of that small plant can help in that way, but rosemary is really great. Then what you do once you finish studying, you get rid of the aroma and you leave your fluorite where it is. But when it's exam time, you slip your fluorite in your pocket like Kyle did, and you want to bring back that aroma of rosemary. Now, that may be you may have like something on your wrist and you can just anoint it, or a little pendant, and that way. And just like when we have a smell or we smell something and it takes us back to a memory of our grandmother's house or an ex's cologne that we hated, so something in the brain that triggers that rosemary and will help you to recall facts as well. So Kyle suggested, hey, you can cheat in exams, and I'm just adding to that as well. So if you get caught, you can't blame the confab. But let's talk a little bit about astrology. We've talked a little bit about Mercury and we've talked a little bit about Saturn. I do find if you reflect on what Kyle was saying when it came to that communication with the blue fluorite, I actually have a blue fluorite pendant, which I think is really good for Mercury retrograde. Obviously, it's working well with the throat chakra. It's about communication, and that's when communication does go a little bit crazy during Mercury retrograde. And I find blue fluorite helps to get your communication and your words in order. So really powerful in that way. However, coming up in the next few weeks, we actually have another planet going retrograde, and it's a biggie. In fact, it's the biggest. Jupiter is going into retrograde. Now, Jupiter is so large in our solar system, and its gravitational pull is so big that if it wasn't there, we would all be sucked into the sun, and all the other planets wouldn't be out where they are. So Jupiter basically holds everything in order. This impacts its symbology, whereas Saturn is about constriction and discipline. Saturn is about expansion and growth and so on. Now, hopefully you've been learning after the 50 or so episodes that when a planet goes into retrograde, it goes on holidays. It takes its help away. So what tends to happen during Jupiter retrograde is opportunities and experiences seem to dissipate a bit. So you may find that social invites decrease. You may find that opportunities disappear. If you work with clients, you may find that you get less clients. If you don't have a fixed income, you may have dropped in income. And if you do, you may find unexpected expenses come up and you're like, oh, I just have less money than I normally have. Now, that all sounds rather bleak and depressing, but what's the opportunity in that? I want you to try a really quick meditation with me. I want you to take a deep breath in. Now take a deep breath in. Now take a deep breath in. And eventually you're going to pop. And the other two are choking on screen at the moment. That's how I get rid of a confab. But what happens is we can't keep expanding and expanding, expanding. We need time to stop and pause. Jupiter retrograde happens for about a third of the year every single year. And this is our time when it's a bit quiet to actually get everything in order, ready for our next expansion. You've probably got a pile of books that you haven't read. You've probably got, some half-finished projects around the home that haven't been done. You've been meaning to finish that e-course or online course that you subscribed to and bought ages ago. This is the time to do this. And this is where bringing in fluorite, and I think either the rainbow fluorite or Jupiter is quite spiritual, so the purple fluorite are really good to work with to go, okay, let's just get everything in order so that when I'm going to take my next expansion, my next inhalation, my next breath in, I've got everything in order, everything's ready to go, everything's functioning well, and so on. It's also really great because Jupiter is quite a spiritual planet. I love to connect it with the crown chakra, working with that, with the purple fluorite. Sometimes that can be really great for going, okay, well, what am I actually trying to do with my life? Like, what is the meaning of my life, and where am I trying to get to? If you're not clear on that and we're just caught in the action all the time, we get to the end of the road and we're very much like, oh, this isn't where I intended to be. So I would recommend having a fluorite, purple or rainbow, around the next 4 months or so to allow yourself just to get your life in order in that type of way as well. Now, I did say at the start in the introduction that I wasn't too keen on fluorite. The reason being is I think it's really interesting for each of us to look at our crystal attractions and our crystal collections and what we tend to be drawn to. I don't believe that isometric crystals don't really do much for me. Pyrite, fluorite, sodalites. But if I look at myself and my character and my birth chart astrology, I'm a very organized Gemini. So almost as though I am like fluorite, like Nicholas was talking about. I've got all the air, but I'm very structured. My life runs in 15-minute blocks kind of thing. I'm the one who's got the spreadsheet and organizing everyone and making sure everyone's here on time or what we're talking about and all that kind of thing. So I just don't need fluorite. It's like me taking vitamin C when I don't need vitamin C in that way. So you may want to look at what crystals you're not drawn to and get to understand and go, okay, there may be a time when I need it, but it's okay in that. But I do want to say also, I remember one day I was going through all my jewelry, and there's a lot of it type of thing. And I was kind of putting it in little color piles because I like to work in colors. And I realized that I'm like, oh, I've got lots of red, lots of yellow, green, blue, indigos, violets, all the colors. And I had very little orange. Now, in the chakra system, my weakest chakra is my sacral chakra. So I've found that I haven't been drawn to orange crystals, not because I don't need it, but maybe because I'm avoiding working at that as well. So look at the crystals that you love, and there's obviously a reason we love them, but look at the crystals that you avoid. Is it that you don't need them, or is it you're avoiding needing them as well? I'd love to know from the other two. Nicholas, is there anything that I just shared there with the wanting and not wanting of being drawn to that you find for yourself resonates?
Yeah, so, the kind of dominant narrative in the overculture of working with crystals is that you'll always be drawn to the crystal you need the most, and the crystals you don't need are just going to repel you. And I think that is true for some people some of the time. But also, sometimes you really need the bitter medicine. Sometimes it is the crystal that you would rather, you know, do anything but work with. That's the one you sometimes need. And the truth is that there isn't a universal answer for every situation. Sometimes the crystal you feel uncomfortable with is a really deep teacher. Sometimes the crystal you feel uncomfortable with is not useful to you. And it's about understanding and being sensitive to how those two different aspects are going to manifest for you. And it requires good introspection. It requires asking meaningful questions, it requires being willing to be wrong. A really great way to find out if that crystal that you want to turn away from is the right crystal for you is to just work with it and to sit through the discomfort and see what happens. Maybe, just maybe, nothing will happen and that wasn't the right crystal for you. Chances are it's not going to make stuff worse. As much as the internet likes to blame specific crystals for everybody's problems in life, we know what I'm talking about. Chances are a crystal is not going to make something worse, unless, of course, we're neglecting in important medical professionals' advice or other things in favor of crystals. That's not an either or situation. It's always a both and. But supposing we are only adding crystals to our life rather than subtracting other things, for most cases, the worst case scenario is nothing happens. So start to notice what you're repelled by. Start to notice what you need more of in your life and see if those two things compare.
I love that. Why does rhodochrosite start coming to mind, Nicholas?
I don't know what you're talking about. Appropriate enough, I think probably one of the next cabinets that I have to work with has an entire shelf of assorted rhodochrosites. And so I'm going to be getting very, very intimate with rhodochrosite based on locality and anticipating the dozens upon dozens of hours of my life that I'm going to spend around rhodochrosite. Maybe now is a really good time to set the bar and maybe just start wearing a little bit around the house.
If you're a loyal listener to the Crystal Confab, it's a bit of an inside joke that we know Nicholas is not a fan of rhodochrosite. What about yourself, Kyle? Any crystals that you find you're drawn to, not drawn to, or anything you can share on that?
I find I actually have the opposite problem to you. Orange is my favorite color. I adore my orange crystals, but that's probably because I am a energetically creative kind of person. I'm kind of more outgoing than less outgoing. I like to play. I like music. I like, that's kind of where I feel more comfortable. But I generally don't need to wear them. Like I have citrine, but it's natural citrine. It is a much more earthy, sort of smoky tone. I have my imperial topaz. I have carnelian, orange calcite, but I don't wear them. And I haven't worn them for a really long time because I don't need more fire. I don't need more of what I already have. Like I have it in spades. I know how to work with it. It's actually tapering that fire that I need. And so I find myself, as I said, wearing natural citrine because it is much more balancing. I generally wear aquamarine and morganite every day in my ears. It's generally the opposite end of the spectrum to who I am that I require, and lots of fluorite because I'm a chaotically minded person. So I need that order. And I think this is why I've explored fluorite quite a lot.
So it is an official crystal confab recommendation that as Jupiter goes into retrograde, you need to get all your crystals out, get them all in order and sort them, and you're probably going to find that you're missing some. And so as soon as Jupiter goes direct again and the money comes flowing back in, we are giving you permission to go buy more crystals. And that's exactly why you listen to us each week. We'll be back next week to talk about a really beautiful crystal. Until then, take care and blessed be.